My esteemed friends, is the Byelomore Dam real? Is Severnaya real? Are Kyrgyzstan or Monte Carlo real? Today I wanted to take a look at the geographical locations featured in the video game GoldenEye 007 and ponder their real-world counterparts, if any. Which locations are inspired by real-world places? Which are completely invented? Let's take a look, mission by mission, and dive into the real-world geography of GoldenEye 007.
Here we go!
Byelomore Dam, located in Arkhangelsk, the site of the first 3 stages in GoldenEye. But how much of this is based in real-world geography? Well, first let's talk about Arkhangelsk, which is the name of both a real city and oblast in the northwest of Russia. Oblasts, of course, are Russia's near equivalent of a state or province. It's a pretty crazy location, not too far away from northern Europe, like Finland, Sweden, and Norway. Now, there is no real Byelomore Dam, though the northern Dvina River flows north through much of the oblast out into the White Sea, a truly remarkable and stunning location, so one could easily imagine a location of a dam somewhere along this stretch. Arkhangelsk, by the way, means Archangel, specifically referring to the Archangel Michael and a nearby 12th century monastery. It's a pretty epic, remarkable, and foreboding place. Kind of feels like GoldenEye the movie didn't explore these sorts of places all that much, but modern Bond movies certainly do encounter all these unique, unusual, foreign, and off-the-beaten-path locations, as well as the earlier Bond movies. GoldenEye was really just total late Cold War, post-Cold War, anti-communist stuff, which is most of what we'll continue to get into. Now, the actual dam used in the movie was not in some place called Byelomore, but was actually the Contra Dam, also known as the Verzaska Dam in Switzerland, near a number of towns at the north end of the Lago Maggiore, which is a much more friendly location to both film and just enjoy, and it has become a popular tourist spot in the years since, with people searching to see this spot where Bond jumped off the dam in that legendary stunt back in the day. So the movie writers, and thus the game adaptation, transported this to some theoretical dam location in Arkhangelsk called Byelomore, which itself means something close to White Sea, hearkening to that deep, icy location where the early parts of the game and movie are supposed to take place. Of course, facility and runway are continuations of this mission, taking place in the same location. One can truly ponder what it would be like to work in such a facility in late Cold War USSR back in the 80s, as of course this is when the dam mission takes place, 9 years before the present-day GoldenEye mission. There's this quip in the facility briefing about how there are no women or casinos for 1,000 miles, so even Bond should be able to stay focused. This is definitely not true, however, as Arkhangelsk is a city of about 350,000 people, so there are definitely plenty of women there. There even appear to be a couple of casinos in Arkhangelsk according to Google Maps, though I've never been, so I can't guarantee that these are indeed actually operating as casinos, and certainly they may not have been there 30 years ago. Anyways, perhaps this nothing for 1,000 miles quip may not be true about Arkhangelsk, but it could certainly be true about the next mission. The next mission is Severnaya, Surface 1 and Bunker 1, and gets revisited a few levels later as Surface 2 and Bunker 2, and is really the main source of inspiration behind this video to begin with, because we get a lot of information in the stage's briefing that we can cross-reference with the real world. The background on this mission reads, a spy satellite has detected increased levels of activity at an old observatory complex near Severnaya, 62.08 degrees north, 102.58 degrees east in Russia. Other sources have confirmed the shipment of a large amount of computer hardware to that location and an influx of skilled personnel. We also read Moneypenny's quip. It's cold in Siberia, James. Make sure you wrap up warm and take care to protect your extremities. But here's the thing. Those exact coordinates bring us here, to the middle of nowhere, a heavily forested taiga in the Krasnoyarsk Krai, Russia. Krais are another word like oblasts, which are Russia's states or provinces. This is the same Krai where the infamous Norilsk is located, the so-called most depressing city in the world, though it's located another 1,000 kilometers or 600 miles northwest. These coordinates are indeed located within Siberia, but Siberia itself is more of a general geographical region, rather than any distinct political entity or state. But here's the thing, there is not really any place named Severnaya nearby. Severnaya is just the feminine of Severny, meaning northern in Russia. So there are lots of places named Severnaya in Russia itself, though none are really located nearby this spot at all. Perhaps the most well-known Severnaya, at least to geography nerds, is Severnaya Zemlya, some of Russia's most northern islands, and some of the last places in the world to actually be discovered in the year 1913. Severnaya Zemlya literally means northern land. You know, I'm reminded of the too late to explore the earth memes. Either way, this Severnaya Zemlya is probably what inspired the naming convention of GoldenEye's Severnaya. Apparently it was called Severnaya in the movie too. Keep in mind, another set of northern islands in the Russian Arctic, a few hundred kilometers to the west, Novaya Zemlya, is where the legendary Tsar Bomba was detonated, along with many other Soviet nuclear experiments. So this is probably what inspired the writers to use the name Severnaya as this kind of far-off Arctic northern land where nuclear testing and superweapons are being explored. Silo. Now, Silo is a game-only mission taking place in Kyrgyzstan, which at the canonical time of the game takes place 2 years ago. Kyrgyzstan today is an independent country, becoming so in 1991 with the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So even 2 years ago from the game's release in 1997, or 2 years ago from the film's release, would still place it as an independent country, though only very recently so, and still certainly heavily connected with the other Soviet states. But even so, the background briefing does say that deep intelligence reports suggest that this operation may well be outside the control of the former Soviet powers in the region, alluding to, the kind of power vacuums that can spring up in these sorts of situations, and perhaps the Yanis Syndicate being the ones behind it. I didn't want to dig too deep into searching for launch silos and secret military bases in Kyrgyzstan, but I'm sure we could find some if we really took a dig. Moneypenny even references the capital city, Bishkek, and the Central Asian steppe. Certainly a beautiful and romantic place to ponder. Frigate. So Frigate is an interesting one because when you play the level, it certainly feels as though it's way out at sea somewhere in the middle of the ocean. But the mission briefing, as well as the movie scene, make it very clear that this takes place while the ship is docked in Monte Carlo. Now, Monte Carlo is actually one of 4 quarters of Monaco, a kind of administrative area. It's likely the most famous one of these quarters, as the Monte Carlo Casino is located there. And honestly, I never even really knew the difference between Monaco and Monte Carlo for a long time. It's kind of counterintuitive that one of the world's smallest countries, smaller than a small city, would have subdivisions within itself, but it does. So according to the story, the frigate is docked in Monte Carlo, and you would imagine there being hundreds of other boats nearby. The open ocean setting is certainly unusual. I think ideally they could have put in some kind of far-flung skybox of a city to represent Monaco. Then again, GoldenEye doesn't really have these sorts of skybox textures. Its skyboxes are more plain and vague, with just sky and clouds floating by really. Something like Super Mario 64's Wet Dry World comes to mind, with that town in the distance, although it could just be a more modernized city in the distance representing Monaco. Or the video game F1 Grand Prix, in which we can race through Monaco, comes to mind as well. I actually played this game a fair bit back in the day and found this one run of the course on speedrun.com, which was quite a throwback. There's a lot of detail in this fine game, which makes sense given the Monaco Grand Prix is like the whole focal point of a Formula 1 game, so it's certainly too much to fit into a GoldenEye skybox, but I feel like there could have been some kind of in-between. Either way, Frigate is definitely supposed to take place in Monte Carlo, Monaco. St. Petersburg missions. So the next 5 missions are the biggest set of connected missions in GoldenEye, and all take place in St. Petersburg. This is the second city of Russia and is located in the northwest. So there's a lot going on in that general wide area of Russia in GoldenEye, as Arkhangelsk is about 730 kilometers or 450 miles away, which sounds like a lot, but for Russia that's actually pretty close. St. Petersburg, known for a while as Leningrad, is a crazily historic city, and the settings of Bond games and movies often do try to touch on that kind of global travel and history vibe. The Statue Park is the first stage of this set of missions, and what's interesting is that there is no real statue park in St. Petersburg like this one. Apparently it was heavily inspired by Memento Park in Budapest, Hungary, a fellow Eastern Bloc state in that period of history. Memento Park has statues of Lenin, Marx, Engels, and many other communist figures. There are a bunch of Google Street spheres here, and they are all quite something to ponder, to say the least. There's also another park, Muzeon Park of Arts in Moscow, with a kind of similar vibe. The actual scene itself was filmed in a purpose-built set in England, which is kind of funny. So yeah, it definitely does not take place in an actual St. Petersburg statue park, but it's not a stretch to imagine that it could. The other levels, military archives, streets, disused military depot, and the train, well, they all logically follow from there. I believe the set designers really did look at the streets of St. Petersburg to recreate them faithfully in the movie and thus video game, which is pretty cool. But Statue is definitely the most interesting location as far as this mission goes, so there's the lore behind it. The train is also apparently heading east, so perhaps it's somewhere on these train tracks traveling outside of St. Petersburg in that direction. Cuba. The next set of stages are the Cuban stages from jungle to cradle. You know, when I think of Cuba as a Canadian, I actually think of a popular beach resort vacation destination. I've never been, but it's very common for Canadians and apparently also Germans to go over and visit the all-inclusive resorts. I know Americans can't or couldn't for a very long time due to the diplomacy of the nations, but yeah, Canadians could always go to Cuba and hang out on the beaches. But I do suppose that Cuba does have some jungles as well, like much of Central America. I found quite a few interesting Google spheres in the Cuban jungle, so the whole series of events here is certainly plausible. Though, as we'll get to, the Cradle is actually the legendary, famous, late-great Arecibo telescope, the huge satellite dish which is, or was, located in Puerto Rico, in American territory. This obviously makes sense, especially for the movie setting, as filming in Puerto Rico was much easier than accessing Cuba and filming there. Though it also makes sense why the film and game were set in Cuba, as again, Cuba is a communist state with close ties to the former USSR, especially in that late post-Cold War time where GoldenEye takes place. The idea of the control center and caverns are definitely plausible as well, anywhere really, but certainly in these Caribbean islands, so all that makes sense too. And then the Arecibo telescope is legendary for many reasons, including being where humanity sent out the Arecibo message in 1974, a sort of message ostensibly sent to send out information about humanity to the cosmos and possibly intelligent life, but more of a demonstration as to what humanity was capable of sending into space at that time, and a representation of humankind. You know, the Arecibo telescope unfortunately was destroyed several years ago. There's this amazing footage of it falling into the ground, so that is unfortunate. Perhaps the device was a bit beyond its date, a little outdated, but we have the movie and all that to remember it by fondly. So all in all, the game and movie have some great settings, which really make sense and harken to that James Bond international spy type genre, touching on post-Cold War, Eastern Bloc, communist state political intrigue, as well as space and technology themes, which is, after all, what the GoldenEye really is, some kind of space-based weapon of mass destruction. GoldenEye, in reality, was the name of Bond author Ian Fleming's oceanfront estate in Jamaica, by the way. There are actually a few Google spheres right on the property, and it's pretty epic to say the least. Ian Fleming bought this in 1946, just after the war, at the age of 38 years old, and I mean, it's just such an awesome place to hang out, write, and create from. You can really imagine just putting pen to paper as the ocean waves crash in. I've often wondered why modern successful streamers and YouTubers don't buy similar properties to this one, and instead seem to just hang out in modern cookie-cutter condos and studios in Los Angeles and Austin, Texas, generally speaking. You know, if I had tens of millions of dollars, I would definitely get some kind of cooked place, at least a lake waterfront, to write and create from. And I can see why Ian Fleming loved this place so much. It's actually a kind of resort these days, so you could plausibly stay there, Numerous celebrities have stayed here in recent times, including singer Adele, who says she met God while staying at GoldenEye. So that's some remarkable lore all round, but what about the bonus stages too? Well, quickly, just before we get to those bonus stages, I want to say thanks to the channel members and Patreon supporters for supporting my work here. And if you made it thus far but still aren't subscribed somehow, then that would be a wonderful thing to do. And if you are, then hit that like button because it does help me out, so thanks. The bonus stages, Aztec and Egypt, are kind of weird blends of numerous James Bond related movies without being totally coherent to a single movie or book. Aztec is very much this weird blend that doesn't entirely make sense. Right off the bat, we're told in the background of the mission briefing that some kind of secret Drax space launch base is located in Teotihuacan, the basin of Mexico, the famous pyramids to the north of Mexico City. In the M briefing, we're told that the Drax launch facility is located in South American Aztec ruin, but Mexico is technically North America, so it's a little bit of a misnomer there. Though I do suppose that many view North America as Canada and USA, while everything else is this sort of Latin South America, even though that's technically not correct. The movie Moonraker, which is obviously the one most heavily referenced on the Aztec stage, with the laser named after it and all, does take place partly in Brazil during the Rio Carnival, which is indeed South America, so perhaps that's where this possible mix-up comes from. The Moneypenny brief references Quetzalcoatl, a slight misspelling of Quetzalcoatl, a god central to the Aztec Empire. When it comes to Egypt, it's certainly a very unusual place. The temple is apparently located at El Saghira, which again is not a real place, though it is supposed to be located in the Egyptian Valley of the Kings near Luxor, which is quite a ways away from the Great Pyramids of Giza, many hundreds of kilometers further down south of the Nile. Or should I say upstream on the Nile. But there are many cool Google spheres here, and they do give that kind of vibe with these pillars of the kind of Egyptian temple that we see, so that's pretty cool. Also, the golden gun comes from Bond villain Francisco Scaramanga, who is not in the game, but is in the titular Man with the Golden Gun. That film does not take place in Egypt at all. The new villain who you battle with that weapon is the Baron Samedi, a Haitian voodoo villain from Live and Let Die. While having probably the best Bond theme of all, this does not take place in Egypt either. Whatever the case may be, it is a cool, albeit fictional setting for the remarkable kind of final showdown, blending a number of Bond references as a kind of ultimate bonus stage, and yeah, I suppose it takes place right around here, near Luxor in the very historic Valley of the Kings.